Good afternoon, Beeville. This is Cindy Clark from PAC-B TV, and I'm here this morning on a Zoom interview with my brother and former mayor of Beeville, Dick Clark. Good morning, Dick. How are you?
Very good, Cindy. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. We decided, we've been talking about it. Actually, it was more his idea, and I got to give him credit, much as I don't want to. He said, let's do a little reminiscing if you get the time. And we'll, at that time, it's that time of the year now. He said, let's do the blizzard of 66. And I said, great idea. So I posted some requests on Facebook to let, have people contact us or post on Facebook their stories, their memories, whatever the case might be. And I knew that we'd get replies, but we got more than I thought we would.
Yeah,
So I'm real excited to share those. But I think I'm going to turn it over to Dick, and he's going to give us a little history of the Blizzard of 66. And then we'll go into some of the stories that have been provided by people who lived through it in this area.
very good. I remember, I'll say I remember it like it was yesterday, and then I'll forget half the stuff I wanted to say. But I remember I was going to OCC. I was 19 years old, uh, and some people who went to Baker after us would remember Bob Cooper as a math teacher. But at that time, he was a fellow student at OCC and a good friend. Lived down on Hayes Road. And he called me up on like the day before the storm, and he said, "Did you hear about the big storm coming?" He said, "I'm afraid if I stay on Hayes Road, I'll never get out of here. So maybe I can come up and park in your driveway, and we can go to school um, Monday morning, and like we always do." And I said, "Yeah, you come up and stay overnight, and we'll be ready to go." So he came up on early Sunday, and parked in the driveway. Dad parked in the garage for the first time I can ever remember, and I don't think he ever parked in the garage again. But he had pulled his car in the garage because of the storm coming. And so Bob parked right behind the garage door. And Dad, I think, into Allied Chemical with a guy he always rode to work with. And they went in on Sunday because Allied was worried about what the blizzard was going to do to get people getting to work. So as I remember, I don't think Dad came home until Thursday. He spent the time, he slept in the locker room and that kind of stuff. But Bob parked his car and he hung out Sunday, and it started snowing. I mean, I've never seen it snow like that ever.
Now, what was the date? Do you remember the actual
January
date?
30th,
That was the date.
1966.
Okay.
And we ended up, the official snow total was 42 inches, but the wind was up over 60 miles an hour for most of 24 hours. The snow continued for 36 hours. So by the time we got up Monday, we looked out the back window towards the garage and couldn't see Bob's car. And if you didn't know there was a car there, you would not be able to tell by the snow. So I remember going out. Dad had one of these long-handled shovels, so I held the head of the shovel, and we just kind of very easily probed into the snow, and all of a sudden finally hit metal. Otherwise, you would never have known there was a car there. And so it was like, well, we're not going to school. And we can't even, we couldn't even find the car, much less try to figure out how to navigate. So went on, like I say, for 36 hours into Monday. Um, and I remember, I don't think a vehicle went up our street till maybe Friday. And then it was like a four-wheel drive type of vehicle. There were some snowmobiles. It was the first time I'd ever seen a snowmobile going up Genesee Street. So it was like a ghost town. If once we could finally get out of the house, and you looked down towards the four corners and looked up, and there was nothing. And it was like that for a day or two or three. I mean, we had tractor trailers always going by our house and rattling nothing. I mean, it was really eerie. And I remember opening the front door to let the dog out, and he got out on the top step. He made, because we had there's a landing by the door and about 6 steps going down. He got outside and he turned around and looked at me like, "You gotta be kidding me." You think I'm going out in that stuff to go to the bathroom? He ended up peeing on the steps because he wouldn't go in the snow. And I really didn't blame him. I mean, it was, it had drifted in places. Uh, the back of our house is one story, and you could have sat on the roof and slid down and gone right off into the driveway and never fall. I mean, it was all like a solid mass of snow. It would have been a great ski jump. Uh, and, I remember, we were fortunate. We always had a good supply of food. Mom always had a lot of stuff on hand, especially soups and stuff like that, because it was 3 or 4 days before anybody went to the store. I mean, I can remember people pulling sleds down the middle of Genesee Street, couldn't walk on a sidewalk. Nobody shoveled their sidewalks. The few of the snowmobiles that had gone had left a little bit of a trail, and people would pull sleds, and then you'd see them going back up with like a cardboard box with milk and bread and the staples. And OCC was closed for a whole week, which was, when I remember being younger and we'd get a snow day and be pretty excited. But I remember once I went to college, people said colleges never call off school because somebody's going to make it. And you're expected to make up whatever you missed. Well, the school was closed for a whole week. So was Syracuse University and, Lemoyne. And uh, you kind of thought at first you were the only ones going through this, and you realize most of the northern part of the county and up in Oswego County was all buried. I mean, it was all lake effect. And what I did what you did. I posted something on Facebook that you and I were going to have this little session, and if anybody had good memories that they would like to share, and some of them were pretty good. Some of them were basic, and I've got quite a few of them that we can share. But it was the funny thing is it was something that we've talked about forever. And somebody used to start to snow and say, "Yeah, but it wasn't like
Right.
66." That was so. That's kind of my history lesson. Fortunately, we had television. We had the TV on all day and all night, and I think we played some games. And of course, with Bob there, we had an extra person, so it was always, you could get if you wanted to play Monopoly and that kind of stuff. And if anybody who was alive for the blizzard of '66 talks about it, like, oh, it was the great storm. That was the big one, especially as you get to be, I'm 78 and my friends were a little bit older than me. So we're talking about getting close to being 80 years old. Your memory gets really good. Ha ha ha. And it's a great memory to have. I mean, we fortunately survived. And
I don't think there's been a storm like that since, is there? Not
well,
in this area.
1983, supposedly there was more snow, but it was over a couple days and it didn't blow. So I mean, you went outside and it was, 3.5, 4 feet of snow, probably closer to 4 feet, but it wasn't. It didn't drift. That was the key with the '66 was people said they. I mean, one of the people here said we went out on our roof and we was the only way we could get out of the house was to slide down the roof and go right down the snowdrift into the yard. And some people were talking about how there was a snowdrift on like the side of the road. You couldn't get over the drift. It was so tall. You certainly couldn't walk over it because it was light enough that you would sink down in. But a lot of people crawled on their bellies. And he said sometimes you got on the other side of the drift and there would be bare pavement the way the wind was blowing. I didn't see a lot of bare pavement,
No, I don't remember that.
but it might have been more even more in the country where wind was blowing harder.
Right, with the open fields.
And you probably can remember times where like I can remember driving out 370 going towards Liverpool and by the farms out there and the snow would drift coming up from the river,
Mhm.
drift over, and you'd hit a drift and almost stop you dead in the street.
Right.
And then all of a sudden it would be bare pavement. And then you'd hit another drift that would be 4 or 5 feet high. So the wind does crazy things, and that storm was the craziest.
It absolutely was. I remember, I don't know which day it was, but I remember going down to the old Gates Silver Star. Now, I think Peggy, our cousin Peggy Power, was working there at the time. And I don't know whether I went down because I think she stayed at our house too, didn't she?
I'm thinking she did towards the end of the week. She did, yes. She wasn't in there in the beginning,
All
but
right. Well, then, anyways, I was going down for something for some reason, and I got to about the four corners where the light is, and I hear this. Now, those who know me know I watch those horror movies, and as we all know, they do not end well. So here I am, all by myself, and I hear this noise coming down Oswego Street towards the Four Corners, and I'm thinking, is this how it ends right here, right now? And I looked, I was almost afraid to look up, and I did. And here comes somebody on cross country skis swishing down the street, heading south onto Syracuse Street over the bridge. And then I went, of course, I breathed a sigh of relief. Uh, but then I went on my way down to the store and did what I had to do, whether we needed milk or bread. And talking about bread, I heard from Dick Warren, whose parents owned the bakery, the Clyde Cakery, as many of you remember. And he said they had the police come over to the house to help them get out and bring them into the bakery so they could bake bread for the stores that couldn't get the deliveries in our area, which there's a little bit of heroism with our
yeah,
local baker. And I don't know if I remember them baking those headlights in Half Moons, but they certainly baked a lot of bread that kept a lot of people in bread in our area. That's
yeah.
another story. There's many more, but that was another sign of cooperation within the community. Now, you said you had a couple more stories from friends of yours. I've got some too, so I'll
Right.
share these as well.
All right, well, I'll do a couple, then you do a couple.
Okay.
We'll go back and forth.
All right.
Um, Jamie Bowes, who I'm friends with on Facebook, he said I lived on the shore of Oneida Lake, stone's throw east of the old Boreo's restaurant. It was snowed in for a few days. Somehow I think I have a photo of the shoveled walk to our house. I was dwarfed by the 6 foot high snowpack, which is what we were left with. Once finding things got cleared, it was hard to shovel the snow at the end because you had to throw it so high to get it over the top of the snowpack. I mean, we're talking 6 feet high snow, and you pick up a shovel full of heavy snow and got to throw it up 6 feet, and then it would come back and fall on you. And you said things you shouldn't have said, and you were glad your parents weren't nearby. He said a neighbor was a helicopter pilot and owner, and he kept his helicopter at the end of the driveway, and he distributed supplies over the next few days. So that was one way they survived. Um, Ray Gallagher talking about Seneca Knolls, and it looked like the way the snow was drifted, you could have walked from housetop to housetop because the snow drifted over toward the neighbor's house, and then it drifted the other way, and it's almost like you could have just walked right down the whole block. I mean, you obviously would have got stuck in the snow, but it didn't feel like that. Um, Let me loosen this up here so I can see. Oh, Linda Markham. We were snowed in for 4 days out in the country. One of the neighbors had a snowmobile and used it to go to a small store in Little Utica to get milk and bread for neighbors. It was horrible. I'm sure if you lived out in the country, it probably was because I'm sure they tried to get the villages and cities and stuff cleaned up before they worried about the country. Chris Kemak, who I know you know, was Chris Shiro and your friends on Facebook. She said, we lived across the street from Johnson's farm on Downer Street. One of our neighbors hiked across the street to get some raw milk. You'll do anything if you're hungry. Thirsty. One of our neighbors had a newfangled snow machine called a skidoo. He went around to all the neighbors taking orders for bread, milk, and eggs and went to Totten's and the Red and White for all our needs. It was an amazing time. The snowdrifts were up to my bedroom window, which was on the second floor, I'm guessing. The village used the plows with a single blade in front to plow the roads. My dad had a Fiat 600, and when the roads were finally plowed, he went out to survey the neighborhood, and it looked like a mouse in a maze. So I'm assuming she's talking being up in the second story window watching him drive down these streets with in this little gray car going around. I could just, pretty good
Yeah.
analogy. I mean, it made me think about it. Um, let's see,
Hey, I
Mac,
got, I
go
don't know if
ahead.
a gal I went to school with, Judy Grome, she said they lived on Downer Street outside the village, the corner of Downer and Kriego. She said the winds blew the snow so much that we had a drift that touched the highest tip of our roof. If a vehicle could make it on the roof, we couldn't see it as the snow was so high. Then we've got another Facebook friend that Dan Waldron, he says he grew up on his parents' farm on Route 48, and he remembers digging tunnels to the animals. I presume he had to milk some cows. Then they would take the snowmobile to get what they need to the village to get what they need for the neighbors, kerosene, staying in one room to heat it, so to save on it, tunnels to go from, to the barn and stuff. Very scary because they could have collapsed. But then you have, I'll do one more here. Darcy Gillette, she grew up on Hicks Road, and she said her parents had brought her home from the adoption agency just a few days before the blizzard hit. Everybody else was snowed in. She said she was about 3 months old and her brother wasn't quite four. Mom was worried about running out of formula, milk, bread, all of that. But she said the Belgium Cold Springs Fire Department, uh, they were able to send out the trucks into the neighborhood, stop by the house to see what essentials were needed, and did emergency grocery runs. There you go.
Well, that's a great memory. Great
Yep.
memory. Tish Evans, who was a tetralt as a child, they lived on East Mud Lake Road. Um, she was saying they were next door to Ina Stebbins. They had a large field, and the wind was whipping the snow, and the massive drifts. The largest one formed around the barn and buried our basketball net 10 feet up. So that was a good way to measure. Um, so I went next door to spend the night at my grandma's and woke up unable to get back home for 3 days. I'd not packed any clothes, intending to run home in the morning and get dressed, so all I had to wear was my nightgown for 3 days. Grandma was watching Reverend Stanley Robinson's dog. Remember, the Robinsons lived kind of across the street from us.
Right.
So I spent the day making dog clothes. My brothers Rick and Ray had to tunnel up the basement door and get to the barn and tunnel in to take care of the horses. Then they started a tunnel to get to Grandma's house so I could get home. Freezers and root cellars were fully stocked, so food was not a problem. No school for the whole week. I don't remember our road was plowed out, but it was a few days. No mail, no newspaper. The blizzard of 93 didn't compare. Max Jumper was coming home from basic training, and he said he was lucky he got in when he did, because if even like maybe a day later, he'd have been stuck in the Newark airport for a week, which would have been a lovely place to spend your time. Meals on Wheels sent one. I'm assuming it's Donna.
Probably.
Donna Metz. I was 10 years old, lived on the north side. Wegmans was a block away. No cars were shoveled out. The snow was more than 4 feet high. We used to jump from the roof to the sidewalk. We had to get through the snow to try to get to the store, and then just all pitched in and shoveled the streets. Eventually, the plows started to come and rescue us. Peter Maloling,
Yeah. Remember
he
Peter?
was staying at Frank McDonald's house. I'm not sure if that was the teacher or another McDonald, but he said I was going to spend the night there. They had to take me down to get clothes. For the 5 days, we shoveled the driveway on Traverse Street 2 times a day. We would play pool and ping pong down cellar. At one point, we were sliding off the roof of the house into the front yard. The dog jumped off the roof into the snowbank and couldn't get out. We had to dig him out. And I heard a few people say that, like, young little kids had jumped off the roof and in the snow, and then there's no place,
Disappear.
they were stuck. So now you had to shovel in and get the kid out of the snowbank. And I can imagine the panic. If it was me, I would have been flipping.
Yep.
Get me out of here.
That's right.
All right, you got more?
I've got Janice Muller Moore. She said they lived on Speech Drive, and her mother and Mrs. Snell decided to pull the wagon down was it the A&P where the Moose Club was?
I think so.
Okay, in the village.
Yeah.
And they said, anyways, neither of them thought to bring any money. Luckily, they let them charge it. Michelle Rittervold, She says, we lived on Tappan Street. Dad worked for Barnes Dairy. He climbed out a second story window and took a sled to get groceries for our neighbors and us. Dick Monica, Richard Monica, who I went to school with, he says his uncle lived around the corner on Meadow Street from us. They were on Grove, and he came over the next morning, check on us, and asked my dad where his car was. Dad said, well, it's in the driveway. Uncle walked over, never saw it. It was a 65 Ford Galaxy, not a small car. And they couldn't find the car in the snow. How's that?
Yeah.
Paul Segovas lived on Downer Street. Father, brothers, and I shoveled snow into mountainous banks. Then we'd sled down Canton Street Hill because there was no traffic. And then he remembers seeing a few snowmobiles for the very first time. That's when he saw snowmobiles. Yeah.
Yep. All right, this is one I want to save. Let's see. Kathy Ancona Walzer said our neighbor Mr. Wells had cross-country skis and he skied to the drugstore to get our neighbor's insulin. My brothers jumped off the roof and into the snowbanks. Quite exciting. They did bring a front loader to dig us out of our driveway. It was kind of scary, but we did it. Let's see here. I was quite surprised at how many people really responded. I
Well, I
thought,
know.
I thought
I've
maybe,
got one, got another one here from Edwina Hay. In fact, I spoke with her too because her father, Maurice Hay, he was a farmer out in near Ellsworth and Sorrel Hill Road in that area in Van Buren. And he used to take milk to Barnes Dairy. And she said that he got plowed out to go to Agway because he and Ernest Turner plowed part of the road so they could get down there and get the milk to the dairy so people could have milk. So they helped get the milk down to the dairy, and then the Warrens baked the bread for the stores too, so we could have that. That was great. I got one from Lori Daggett. Remember her?
Yep.
She says we had a week off from school and they were out of bread, milk, and eggs, of course. She says her foster mom, Mrs. Cagle, dressed her up in 3 of everything, and they walked over 6-foot mountains to where the grocery stores were. There was no P&C back then; it was A&P. And then uptown to Perrin's Market because they lived upstairs and they could get in very easily. And they walked all the way home from Perrin's Market to 10 Salina Street. She says quite an experience and an adventure. And then the next day they got the kids in the neighborhood to shovel everybody out. And they all had hot chocolate and cookies. Great memories. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. Richard Walsh. I lived in Baldwin, so I remember that storm. I did a lot of shoveling. He was not alone. Bill Tynan, great photographer, said Dad stopped shoveling on day 2. Day 4, we climbed out onto the side porch roof from their bedroom on the 2nd floor. We tried to shovel off the roof of it, but ended up jumping into the 6-foot plus snowdrift against the 1st floor windows. Off to school for a week, great snow tunnels on North Street. Next year, everybody bought snowblowers. I'm not sure a snowblower would have helped. I mean,
I know.
there's no way you
Where would
could.
you put it?
Yeah,
I mean, where would you spray the snow if you could get it through? I mean, who knew? Who knew?
you got Andy Rice had said in that he he was trapped in the snow. They lived down on off of 370 um, Barber Lane, I think it is.
Mhm.
He said, I have to ask Jerry for more information because I was kind of young. He said, I got stuck in the snow and Jerry had to blaze a path on his hands and knees to come and get me because you couldn't walk. The snow was so deep. If you tried to walk, you got stuck. And him and his little dog, Duffy, got stuck. So I did talk to Jerry and ask him if he remembered. And he said, oh, yeah, I remember. He said, Dad said, get out and rescue that dog. The dog couldn't move. He said, so I brought the dog home. And Dad said, well, go back and get your brother. If you know Jerry and Andy, that's not a surprise. So I want to see what, Jerry had a couple memories that were interesting. I can't get the pages to separate here. Apparently there was he'd gone towards Sam Taylor lived out that way, and he was friends with Sam, so he'd gone out somehow got out to the backyard and then got stuck. And so Jerry said he did rescue the dog and got Andy. So then his older brother Tom and he walked into the village to get food, and that's a pretty good hike from where they live
Mm-hmm.
in 370. And he said, like they started and there was this huge snowdrift. They got over the top, had to get over the top of the snowdrift and into the road. And he said one of the drifts they went over, he said, I thought it was all snow. He said, all of a sudden I hit something. And he said, so he scraped the snow off and it was a yellow um, blinking light type of thing. And they realized that it was a truck, snowplow truck underneath that drift. They must have got stranded or something. And so they're going over the top of a truck. And we got into the village, and he said, of course, my brother had to stop and grab a beer first.
Sure.
But then they went to, he was guessing it was Gates' Silver Star and grabbed some groceries. Um, and Jerry remembered it very well. Of course, he was a couple years behind me in school and a year ahead of you, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So his memory shouldn't be too bad.
I got one from Donna Butura. I went to school with her. They lived at 26 Downer Street, and she said they had snowmobiles, so they helped all the neighbors. She says there was no traffic for over a week, so they rode them in the road. I bet that was exciting, especially we were like 15, 14, 15 at the time. I'm sure that was real exciting for her. And then we've got Sarah Graham Nestler. She says her then boyfriend, later husband, came for dinner the Sunday the snow started and never made it home until Tuesday. We found the car, no problem. It was the 6 foot high snowbank behind the car left by the snow plows before they were pulled off the road. Says by Tuesday, my parents, boyfriend, and I had a major case of cabin fever. They hitched a ride on the snowmobiles down to the Fireside Inn, and Joe Fadden had a huge pot of vegetable soup on the stove, warm bread in the oven, and the bar was open. They had a ball.
Sarah had an itching to get out and party. Sarah?
Imagine that.
It was a shock.
Well, you're getting cabin fever.
Yeah.
Yeah. And look at, well, then we had in our family, member Scott, he was born on the 26th of January. And I think, when women had babies, then they stayed in the hospital a little bit longer. But I know when the snow started now, I tried to get some memories, and Scott didn't really remember the whole story because I said, well, did they encourage you to leave, or was that time for you to leave? And he didn't quite remember how that was, but they got home just in time. Otherwise, they probably would have been stuck in the hospital for a week, I would imagine. That's a great way to start it off, huh? That's how you remember the year of his birth is because of the blizzard of 66. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Our friend Ross Pickering, I was working at Day Brothers store at the time. Like everyone else, I was unable to get to work for 3 or 4 days. My car was parked in my neighbor's driveway and it looked like a small bump on the snow, which was at least 5 feet high. So that was a lot of that, where you just, like Jerry going over the truck, not knowing there was a truck in the snowdrift. I wondered how many plows plowed into cars that were stranded on the side of the road and you didn't even know they were there. Really weird.
I didn't hear too many stories about people getting stuck traveling like from Syracuse to Baldwinsville, or mostly hear the stories of after it hit.
Yeah.
But as far as anybody traveling, I didn't. Did you get any stories about people actually traveling in it, and if they had any problems getting home, or?
Not much. I think people realized how bad it was. And just hunkered down. I'm sure, you had to you had to think it was hard for like the police, who you had to have them in. Our police force wasn't anywhere near the size of the current police force. They had like 3 or 4 guys. So if you didn't make it in, they were really, might not have been anybody on that shift. So I'm guessing people worked double and triple shifts. And what could you do? You couldn't get, like if somebody called and said somebody's trying to break in my house, you'd have to drive as far as you could drive and then walk because in side streets, I mean, like we're on Genesee Street, our street got plowed out first because
Yeah,
it was the main artery. But if you were on North Street or, Walnut Street, that type of thing, that probably was even a couple days more before you got plowed out.
right.
So the police were handicapped. Now, fortunately, times were different and people had empathy and sympathy and whatever for people what they were going through. And I never heard of anybody looting anything or,
No, I didn't either. Everybody kind of stuck together. It was for the kids, it was an adventure. But for the adults, I'm sure it was very frightening because, first of all, for the people that worked, most of them couldn't get to work. And then you're concerned about food. Luckily, we were in the village, so we had access to the grocery store. And for some reason, they had food or the supplies. And like you said, we had probably enough in, the refrigerator and the cupboards to keep us going. Obviously, I don't remember being hungry. So I'm sure we did all right. But, some of these people I'm sure suffered. But uh, this is where the community came in and the fire department, the law enforcement, people on snowmobiles. You kind of have to band together to help because what else could you do? We didn't have the snow removal equipment that we do now. And, we were we were in a bad way. We
yeah.
struggled. But like I said, as kids, we loved it. We had a week off, we partied and we shoveled and we played. But I'm sure the adults don't remember it quite the same way.
Yeah. Um, Gail Maloling Subert, who I graduated from high school with, she said, my sister and I stayed with my Aunt Thelma Searles in Anita Manor just outside of Beeville. My mother was in the hospital. We were staying with my aunt so dad could get back and forth and not have to worry about how kids were doing. Um, the only sad thing is he didn't get to see mom for a long time because of the blizzard. He was home and she's in the hospital and he couldn't get to the hospital to see her. Anita Manor was one way in and out. A huge snowdrift blocked the road about 3 houses in from Route 31. Supplies were brought to us by friends on snowmobile, and we walked up and crossed the drift to meet them at Route 31. It was like 2 stories high. After a week of huge snowblower attached to the front of a big dump truck came to remove the drift, it was the only way to clean it out. I think that truck may have been part of the county snow removal equipment. It was fun and exciting, except we missed everybody in the family that we couldn't see.
Right.
Um, um, Mary Vanette Hawks. My mom had just had her first set of twins. My dad worked for the village, and the guys took turns bringing us supplies. Can't imagine being snowed in with two brand new babies and two other little ones. Let's see what we got here. Jack Rice. He said, I spent several days with the Hahn family right across from where Lou and I finally lived for 43 years. Larry and I got lots of practice time in our band for our band, the Statics.
Right? They used to
And
practice in the garage.
we drove everybody nuts
Oh, I imagine.
playing the guitar for hours. I finally got home and helped shovel a path down our long driveway and could hardly throw the snow up over the banks, which, as I mentioned before that. Judy Winship Hollins from the
Mhm.
Winship Shoe family was in New Jersey with a friend. Parents wanted me to stay, but I was homesick. I insisted they take me to the train. All went okay until we got near Syracuse. Then the passengers had to wait while they shoveled the tracks.
Oh,
I never so glad to see my dad waiting for me. We had one of his old boats of a car. Remember, the cars were so big back then, some of them. Had pictures of me shoveling the walk at 91 West Genesee Street. The snow was well above my mom's head, and she was 5'3". So another case of how do you get the snow up over the top?
right.
I'm sure, right? One's up, one back on you. One's
Yep.
up, one falls back on you. Um, Daryl Butler, no plows, no school. Neighbor ski-dooed me down to the red and white for some groceries. Snow with the wind was at the peak of our house. It was so much fun.
Yeah, like I said, for the kids, it was great. For the
Yeah.
adults, they probably were in panic mode most of the time.
Now, this may be somebody that you ran into. You said Barb Sloat, Simildoro. I lived at 19 Downer Street. My dad worked at Morris Pumps, and he strapped on a pair of cross-country skis and went across town to make sure all was well at the plant. We got back, we pushed our way to the barn out back, got out the second story window and shoveled snow off the roof. When we were done, we walked down the mountain of snow that we had shoveled. Robin Gooden,
Yep.
I think they lived up on like where Brown Street meets Mott Road. My brothers and I were able to dig a snow tunnel that snow tunnel that wrapped around our house. The snow was up to the second floor windows. During the storm, my parents and I dressed warmly, put on our skis so we could experience the storm. We went out the front door. The wind was blowing snow and sleet into our faces. We crossed the driveway, entered into our garage through the people door. That was the extent of our excursion. So they came out the front door, got across to the side door, and back in the house. Wasn't much,
And,
wasn't
go
fit for
ahead.
wasn't fit for man or beast. That's for
No, it
sure.
wasn't. It wasn't. I got another one here from Dawn View. She says she remember the snowstorms, snowed for days on 60 Road. There's another one from 60 Road. One of our neighbors had a big tractor and got milk and bread for all of us. Had awesome neighbors. Boy, the community hasn't changed. They all come together, don't they?
Yep,
And Jay Etzett, you remember Jay Etzett, right?
yep.
Okay. His farm, family farm, was halfway between Beeville and Plainville on Route 31. And just before you turn into Beaver Lake. And he said they have beef cattle, so they only had to feed them twice a day. When I crossed 370 from our house to the north side to the barn on the south side, I took a tea kettle of hot water with me to thaw the cattle watering trough. Apparently, an emergency vehicle had come through earlier with a big Oshkosh V blade, and the road looked like a trench. Remember, you were talking about that earlier. The snow banks were about 10 feet high on each side. He says he had an easy time getting to the road, but a tough time getting up on the other side. The cows were glad to see him, I imagine. And he says, I'm glad we didn't raise dairy cattle. It was a long 3 to 4 days till we could dig out.
Yeah, it wasn't anything quick about it. Ellen Wilkinson, um, she was going to Syracuse University at the time, and she was going back to school, and her dad, again, probably had one of those big cars, and he had to take her up to SU as the storm was really starting up, and had all they could do to get up the Adams Street Hill, and he dropped her off and basically said, "I'll see you in the spring." Like, this snow is we ain't getting back up here anytime soon.
No, no. And that hill's not good at all on a good day.
Yeah, when it's dry out, it's not very fun.
I know, especially if you have a standard.
Yeah. Let me just see here quick. Dwayne Woodall, they lived down off of Hayes Road on Perryville Road.
Hmm.
No school for a week, no plows for a week. My mom was a canner, so we had canned food. We had a potato bin, an apple bin, and mom made bread. Big box of Carnation instant milk. My dad had to walk all the way up Hayes Road, through 4.5 feet of snow to 370 to catch a ride to work. Snow drifts around the house were easily 7 foot high. Cars were buried under snowbanks. We saw one snowmobile, and Hank Check's Field Corner Store sold out of beer and cigarettes. Marge's showboat was open and doing a booming business. 66 was certainly a year to remember.
Oh, it was. It certainly was. Yeah.
I got a couple more that I want to, but one of them is a sad one, and one is a kind of an upbeat one. So I'll finish up mine with those, and then you can wrap up with what you.
Okay.
Um, I I had remembered this, but I really wasn't sure how I wanted to approach it. And then Dick LaValle sent me a message, and he said that he always thinks of Lynn Dixon when he thinks of that storm. And Lynn was a 66 member that excuse me, a member of the class of 66, and lived off of 370 near Patchett Road out in that area, and had a girlfriend who lived over on Route 31, out past where Budweiser is, further out. And, knowing they were going to be snowed in, I think he thought he would take a hike over there. And, if he got stuck for a day or two, that wouldn't be so bad either. And unfortunately, he somehow got lost in the snow. I mean, it was, people can't understand how bad it was, but it was, and we had some great memories of it, but I can imagine anybody that had to be out in it, it was awful. And he got misdirected and lost, and uh, I don't think they found his body until spring. Because they had
There's
no idea where he exactly went, and the snow was high. I mean, you couldn't even find a car, much less, a person. And so people who went to school with him and the neighbors and that type of stuff were never forgot uh, the loss of Lynn Dixon. And as much as we can smile about some of the things, those are the kind of things that turn our face the other direction a little bit. And I was glad that Dick sent me that message so I could use it to sort of mention it here. Now, the positive one, uh, kind of an upbeat one, Jean Lupton, and she didn't put her maiden name, so I don't know, but she said, I lived in Warner's on Railroad Street when the storm hit. I was single in my early 20s and had a brand new Ford Falcon. The snow kept coming and I was snowed in for a week. But I had my last big paycheck from work, which was a whole $80. I needed to get the bank so I could pay bills and do laundry. So as soon as the plows got us out, I headed out to the bank. To make a long story short, I ended up having a head-on collision in a spot on a curve that was only plowed one lane wide. So, I mean, they got funneled right down and there was nowhere to go. My car was bad. I ended up in the hospital for 14 days. When I got out of the hospital, my jaw was still wired shut, top to bottom. So I was on a liquid diet, had a big gash in my chin with stitches. The stitches had just been removed. I was in no mood to go anywhere or be seen by anyone. My girlfriend came over determined to get me out of the house. They talked me into going out with them to a local bar at a place called Iona Corners. Tall, handsome guy was staring at me and smiling. I was thinking he was pretty cute. He came over and asked me to dance, so I did, but I kept my mouth closed. He finally asked, why don't you ever smile? So, well, I thought, why not just get this over with? So I smiled at him, and all he saw was black metal bars and rubber bands going from my top teeth to the bottom teeth, which were yellow because I wasn't able to wash, to clean them. Not to mention my breath smelled like a decaying body. I thought to myself, well, I'll never see him again. But he asked for my phone number, and I'm thinking he's just being polite. He'll never call. But the very next day he called, um, wanted to see me. 2 months later, we were married. We were married for 54 years. He was the love of my life and my soulmate until I lost him to cancer in November of 2020. He was one in a million. I considered him, he was good friends with apparently with Andy Reeves. Should I thank God every day for the blizzard?
there's always, when you have a situation like this, it shows the resilience of a community. You have your happy, you're sad, you're funny, totally memorable experiences. But again, it shows the resilience of a community.
Yeah.
Back then, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have, I don't. That's one thing that I didn't have a lot of was pictures. As an aside, if anybody has pictures from the blizzard of 66 and would like to share them, send them to me at my email. It's misscoley1 at verizon.net. That's MSCOLEY, the number one at verizon.net. And we can add them to this clip to get some pictures. So those that never experienced it or have kind of forgotten or, just had no idea just what a storm it was, you can get some idea because it was hopefully once in a lifetime event because there was nothing like it then, nothing like it now. It's just, and I'm a senior citizen and I have never experienced anything quite like that since the blizzard of 66. It was unforgettable. Well, here we are talking about it how many years later on almost the anniversary of it.
Yeah.
So, like I say, it shows the resilience of a community that we haven't changed. Our community's still great here, and we can look back on all these wonderful memories. But again, if you want to send me those pictures, or if you have any, please send them to me. We'd be happy to see them. Mayor Clark, I appreciate you spending some time here doing a little flash from the past.
I
And
wanted to
if anybody
mention,
else has any more to offer, just let us know. And I'm hopefully we can add on some more little sidebars to let people know just what we went through. And I know you want to say something.
well, I was, as a follow-up to Jean Lupton's note, she was very thankful for the blizzard because otherwise she wouldn't have been out, it wouldn't have been no reason to take her out that night, especially in going to where they went. And she met her husband to be, unknowing at the time. And his name was Leroy Lupton. For people my age in Beeville, there were three Lupton brothers, Tom, Leroy, and Wendell. And it was like a Western movie when they would walk into a dance or something. The three of them, Tommy was a great big guy, like 6'3" and big. And Leroy was taller and tall but thin, and Wendell was shorter. So it was just everybody has a perspective. I mean, we had a great memory because first of all, we were warm, cuddled up. I mean, our house was, was an old house, but was mom was always cooking. I'm sure we had a lot of cornbread. I'm guessing she probably made a cake or two
Would
to keep
imagine.
us going because she made cake all the time. And we didn't lose anybody, but you imagine if you were somebody and somebody was having a heart attack and you call the ambulance and you hear this panic in the ambulance people because they're not sure they can get to your house. I'd be interested to know if anybody, I don't know that there'd be too many people who were involved with the ambulance corps back then who are still around to even remember it, but it would be interesting to hear the emergency people what they had to go through, the police, and
All the first responders, yeah.
I mean somebody's driving up the street and in the middle of the street and they get stuck. Where do you go? You can't pull out, you can pull off to the side because the snow on the side is higher than the snow in the middle of the road. But the fortunate thing, we didn't hear too many of those stories, so must
No.
be, it was just one of those wonderful moments that it's mostly all good memories, and I'm glad we took the time to share it because I'm sure that there's people that are going to go, oh yeah, I remember, what a fun time as a little kid. I mean, you could play with toys for a week and didn't have to go to school. Uh, I can remember we tunneled a little bit for the dog, dug out so the
Mm-hmm.
dog could at least get on to where the yard was supposed to be to go to the bathroom, and you know, it was like you say everybody seemed to help everybody else out. I mean, I do think people came to the door, neighbors came to the door and said, "Do you need anything?" Uh, People were, we had older people. The Collinses lived next door. Uh, I think people looked out for them. Uh, the Hollies who were across the street. I don't know if they were still there. They probably were still there then, because George taught after I graduated, so I'm sure people stopped in to see how they were doing. And it was a what could have been a real bad thing, what turns out to be generally pretty good memories for most of us. And it's been kind of fun going through it. And most everybody that responded, I know, I mean, from
Yep.
one way or another, and to bring all the people's memories together. Good job, Sen.
Well, I think it was just so much fun going back and reminiscing. We had a gal, Lynn Andrews, who said she wants to thank us because it helps her reminisce. She had a sister had a farm on West Sorrel Hill, and her niece and her nephews and she were sliding off the roof down the snowbank. So she's very appreciative that, to hear this, to see it, what we all went through, because they're great memories for most of us, the young ones. It really was kind of a magical time, just not being in school for a week, and just it was totally different than anything we've ever been through before. Not that I want to go through it again. Not that I want to go through it again. But if anybody has any other stories they want to add, feel free to send them in to us, put them on Facebook, on my brother's site, my site, whatever, or the PAC site. And if anybody has any other topics that you'd like to reminisce, just let us know that too. And we'll see what we can do to help you out, because there's so many of us still, that there's so many things that happened that we would like to talk about, and how things used to be in Beeville. So if you think of anything, and again with the pictures, feel free to send them in because we'd love to see them. But thank you, Mayor. I appreciate your time, our little walk down memory lane, and everybody have a
Let's
wonderful Valentine's
let's
Day.
remember
Oh,
to
one more. There's always one more with them. Okay.
no, we have a couple. We should say a couple thank yous to Tina Solomon for setting us up
Oh,
the Zoom account, and then my wife Linda for getting us into it. And I want to thank PAC-B because there's not many communities that have this kind of an outlet. I don't know that people realize that, but there's not many places around where
no.
that have a place where you can go on TV and share your histories, your athletic events, your meetings, and so you know, a salute to PAC-B. I think it's one of the greatest assets the village has ever had. So
Well,
I
and thank you for remembering to thank Tina and your wife Linda. I certainly do appreciate that. But again, thank you for your time. Thank you all for watching. Any suggestions anybody has, please send pictures or any other comments you may have. We'd appreciate it. And take care. Stay safe.